Greetings from Boston. We are live, covering day 5 of I believe it's the 138th U.S. Open. Wow, what a day. Hey, Chura, what's going on? A bit late. It's been a long day. My voice needs to kind of get attuned to this, but some fantastic matches today, and Rafael Nadal has escaped the clutches of the 6-foot Karen Khachanov. It was a 4-set match. I want to talk about this match, and I want to try to give you the essence of what happened and what it means for Rafa's future in this tournament, because the bull was a little shaky today. The bull was a little shaky. The excitable bull was slightly shaky, and he was not exhibiting his usual traits, those traits of preventing opponents from consolidating. That's what he wasn't doing. Well, I want to give you the nugget about the Nadal match today. I want to talk about that match because I think there is one key to that match, to understanding first just why this Khachanov gentleman, and he was a gentleman, just why he was able to ruffle the feathers of the great Nadal, just why he was able to take Nadal to 4 sets. How did this happen? Listen to this score: 5-7, 7-5, 7-6, 7-6. This was a close match. I never felt like I was comfortable with anybody serving. Nobody's serve felt very dependable, but ultimately I think Khachanov's serve was a little more dependable than Nadal's. Hi, Daniel. I didn't expect it either, that Khachanov would, again, give Nadal such a hard time. Well, Nadal was having some of his own issues. I saw some clips from the locker room. Of course, he had a bit of a preparation on his right knee, and he was fiddling around with his right knee in the locker room, which could explain a little bit, but Rafa seemed to be firing on all cylinders, to be honest. It was just that Khachanov was too strong. The serve was too strong, and mind you, coming into this match, Khachanov had the best first serve win percentage of anybody in the tournament, in the matches that he played in the tournament. Yes, he was the leader in first serve win percentage coming into this match. Well, that dropped off a little bit in this match because Nadal is, of course, a devastating returner, but the conditions were also different. The conditions were different. They were much cooler, obviously. It was a very dramatic change, in the weather. And this resulted apparently in some lower bounces, which is not particularly favorable to Nadal. So that might have explained why Nadal wasn't kind of delivering when he was needing to deliver. Nadal, the delivery man, was not really in the house today. Where did the delivery man go? I don't know, but he wasn't delivering, folks. Like I said before, excuse my voice. It's been a long day, but I'm kind of getting into this. I want to get into the flow of this discussion because it was an important match. It says a lot about what's going on. Of course, Nadal is the favorite to win the tournament. Scientifically speaking, he's the safe bet to win the tournament. And I think that this match doesn't necessarily change that. But it does problematize my assertion from a few days ago that Nadal's draw, his path through this draw, was smooth as a baby's bottom. Well, Karen Khachanov roughed up this baby's bottom quite a bit. And This guy, I think, has a future based on the way he played today. Really big guy, a tremendous serve, amazing on his serve. But I want to get to the key nugget about this match. I want to understand why it was, because I watched it closely and I think I know pretty much exactly what happened. The key to understanding why Nadal couldn't get into Khachanov's serve, or Khachanov, excuse me. I was calling him Khachanov, but apparently you don't pronounce the K. It's just Khachanov, or maybe Khachanov. But Rafa couldn't get into his serve. Now, there was a lot of breaking and breaking back. There were exchanges of breaks of serve. In fact, each player broke the other player 5 times in this match. Khachanov had a better conversion rate on his break points than Nadal did. Nadal suffered a little bit on the conversion rate. Again, Nadal, the delivery man, really wasn't in the house today. He wasn't delivering. Well, finally he did. Finally he did, and I want to talk about that in the final set. But generally, the delivery man was absent for most of this match. And you could argue basically for all of it. Now, he did deliver what he needed to deliver to get through the match and escape Khachanov, who was closing in on the great Nadal. It was quite exciting to see. Not that I really thought Nadal was going to lose the match after Khachanov won the first set. No. I didn't believe that. But what Nadal wasn't doing is he wasn't preventing Khachanov from consolidating his breaks. That's what Nadal is so good at. He's the anti-consolidator, let's say. He's the excitable bull, but he's also the anti-consolidator. He prevents opponents masterfully from consolidating their breaks of serve against Nadal. But tonight, he wasn't doing it. But the key to understanding, and for those folks just tuning in, this is the nugget. This is the key to understanding, I think, why Nadal failed to close this out a little more quickly and decisively. It was the 15-30 points on Khachanov's serve. In other words, when Khachanov was serving at 15-30, Nadal failed to convert it to a double break point for the entire match. And there were many 15-30 points on Khachanov's serve. Now, part of this was because of Khachanov. A lot of credit to him. He was able to protect himself from that very sensitive point. 15-30 is it's probably the most significant point in a match if it ever, or in a game if it ever gets there. Nadal could not convert 15-30 into a double break point ever. So he had to deal with single break point. He had to go to the deuce cycles, and he couldn't convert there either most of the time. Now, in the final set, Nadal kind of broke free from that little curse, that little slump of delivering some impressive tennis 15-30 on Khachanov's serve. Well, I will say this about Nadal, folks. He stayed so positive throughout this match. I think that's one of the things that must distinguish Federer from Nadal at this point, because Federer, I believe, is having a hard time staying positive, staying committed to the match. Nadal was in it to win it the whole time. And I respect that and love that about the man. He stayed positive. He pumped himself up. And he played some great tennis when he needed to play it. Now, he was spraying a few forehands around like it was a garden hose or something, but that was very uncharacteristic. There were a little too many unforced errors. And again, it works. Spraying that stuff around in your garden might work to kind of grow your lilies, but it's not going to win a tennis match, folks. So he was a little strange with that. There were some mishits on Nadal's forehand, which was strange. Now, I think it might go back to a right knee issue because, again, he was fiddling with his right knee. He had a preparation on his right knee during the course of the match. He did get a few gifts from Khachanov. In the third set tiebreaker, Khachanov served 3 double faults, which were the only double faults he served in the entire set, and he did them all in the tiebreak. So while Nadal did play some great tennis in that tiebreak, he was gifted 3 points, essentially. Now, you can look at that issue from a different perspective, and you can argue that Khachanov was taking some risks with his second serve, and therefore it was, a bargain for risk. He made a decision to go hard with his second serve, and he paid for it with a few double faults. Generally, however, Nadal looked much stronger in the end, and that is a positive sign for Nadal fans, a really positive sign, because he was able to persevere through this match and do a bang-up job in the end. I mean, it did go to a breaker in the final set, but Nadal did push through. But, folks, the nugget is that at 15:30 on Khachanov's serve, which occurred, I believe, about 8 times during the course of the match, Nadal could not deliver. The delivery man was nowhere to be found at 15:30 on Khachanov's serve. Well, that changed finally in the last set when he was able to convert that into a double break point, and he did convert the first opportunity to do so. Well, that got messy again, and that set went to a breaker, but Nadal delivered the clutch tennis in the breakers, even though he was gifted with those double faults. I was talking about the Federer pair match last night, and a few people mentioned that Benoit, the bearded one, was serving a whole number of double faults, and that those were gifts to Federer too. And I'm not sure those were calculated risks. They were to some degree, a few of them were, but there were some, basically just gifts to Federer in that respect too. So all of these matches have some proportion of, of one player sort of losing the match, one player doing things wrong to produce the outcome, and there's another confluence of factors relating to the other player, the winning player, doing things right. And so the outcome of the pair Federer match was partly because of the things that Federer did right, and partly because of the things that pair did wrong. And you could say the same thing about the Nadal-Khachanov match. But not to digress into Federer, we talked about that a lot, and I want to talk a little bit more about that at the end of this stream, but we'll have more Federer coming on tomorrow. He's playing Kurios, and his draw is changing a bit, and I want to talk about those changes. Next for Nadal is Basilashvili, Georgian. They played once. Nadal did a very devastating job on the poor lad at the French Open in 2017. It was 6-0, 6-1, 6-0. All bagels and breadsticks, folks. But Basilashvili has been turning in some very good results in the tournament, and he's shown up on a few lists in terms of the top numbers coming out of the tournament as a whole after these 2 or 3 matches. And so he's a contender. He might be able to give Nadal a bit of trouble. Nadal will have to take the lad seriously. I'm not sure why I'm calling him a lad. He's from Georgia, which was an old Soviet republic. But it could be an interesting match. But in general, I think that Nadal was a little shaky today. I think there might be something going on with the knee. I think he wasn't quite delivering. It could be something relating to the courts. Potentially the balls were bouncing a lot lower. Could have been even moving quicker. The courts could have been playing a little quicker. And I tell you what, Khachanov is very talented. He reminded me of Djokovic sometimes in the extent to which he was returning shots that he really had no business returning. He was a wall. He's got a very impenetrable wall, Khachanov, at least when he's playing well. But he also has the capacity to dictate play in very impressive ways that were befuddling the great Nadal. With that said, Nadal pushed through and he did deliver at many of the right moments, but he needs a better conversion rate and he needs to bring in the delivery man at 15-30 because the extent to which he was botching that critical point in the match against Khachanov, I think explains the outcome or explains why Khachanov was able to do this, because I think the real news is kind of about Khachanov. He was the one that sort of raised eyebrows today. Rafa wasn't raising a lot of eyebrows. Well, there's always a few shots in a Rafael Nadal match that raises a few eyebrows, but Khachanov was sort of the person that was inspiring a lot of praise, of course, from the announcers and from all the onlookers. Well, congratulations to Karen Khachanov. He did a great job today. Nadal was very civil and gentlemanly at the handshake, and it was a nicer handshake than most of them that you see, in fact. So that was nice to see as well. I like it when that happens. So let me know your thoughts on the Nadal match, folks. It was interesting. I think the bull is slightly shaky, but it could have been just a hiccup. We'll have to see what he does in his next round. It certainly was, a bit of a more problematic performance than his previous match at the tournament, or matches. And we'll just have to see what he can do with Lashvili. But finals, of course, we're going to have either Thiem or Anderson. We'll talk about Thiem match today. Also, Anderson was able to outdo Chapeau, which I was kind of disappointed to see. I'm a big Chapeau fan. And that was a 5-set match and a real stunner that we can talk about a little bit. But Nadal will be facing either Thiem or Anderson in the quarterfinal. Now, Thiem and Anderson will be playing in the round of 16, and we'll talk about that in a second. But one noteworthy aspect of that in terms of the history is that Anderson has a leading record against, or leads in the head-to-head against Thiem, and the only time Thiem has been able to beat Anderson is on clay. So that's interesting, and that could be a really interesting match. I'll talk about Thiem in a second. He looked very good today. It looks like Stan's out. Raonic was just too much for Stan Wawrinka to handle, folks. Stan looked very beautiful, in fact, and serene in the first set, just effortless. And that was pushed to a tiebreaker, and Stan, based on a few errors, really kind of gated the second set. The first set. What a disappointment that must have been, because Stan was the better player on the court in the first set, without question. He was landing some beautiful stuff. Again, just effortless. just effortless, limber, moving around beautifully. But Raonic was just too much with the serve, and then Stan sort of fell apart with some unforced errors. And I'll get into that a little more. I wanted to talk about the Djokovic versus Sandgren match just briefly, because he's another one of the players we're keeping a very close eye on. In fact, after Nadal's performance today, I think we should probably be keeping an even closer eye on Djokovic. He's coming up on Rafa's hind end, in terms of the performances here at the tournament. But this match against Tennis Sandgren was another street fight, at least for a while. It was a four-setter again. Djokovic let a set go, was unable to stop Sandgren, whose serve really improved in the third set, which Sandgren won in a tiebreaker, 7-2 in the breaker. But in all of the other sets, Djokovic, the elastic hyena, very much dominated, landing 71% of his first serves, winning 70% of his firsts, and almost 60% of his seconds. 30 unforced errors, which was a bit too many from Djokovic, and that was part of the problem in the third set. Djokovic was 7 for 16 on the break points, which was 44% conversion rate. Not bad. Even more impressive, he was winning 58% of his second serve return points. Well, in the fourth set, Djokovic turned it on, and it goes back to this point I was talking about last time, or a couple of streams ago, which is he needs adversity. I called it a paradox. I'm kind of still searching for the right term. Paradox will do, but he needs adversity sometimes to kind of kick him into gear. Well, in this match, he opened up with a breadstick against Sandgren, so he was looking fine. The second set was a little tighter, but the third set was the real reckoning for Djokovic. But he pushed through, and he came back, and he finished strong, just like Nadal and just like Thiem, as we'll talk about. Very fourth set, only 4 unforced errors off the racket of the Serbinator. He was 2 for 4 on break points, which is a 50% conversion rate. Plenty sufficient to do away with Sandgren and send him packing like a fat boy in a dodgeball game. He was 50% on the return points, talking about Djokovic over and rushing up on the tail of Rafa Nadal in terms of being a favorite to win this tournament. It could very much happen, but I want to talk about some other folks coming through. I talked about Alexander Zverev last night. He's showing up in some aggregate numbers for this tournament, some top numbers on serving and return did before he was ousted by Nadal. I'm calling Zverev the snake in the grass because he's just slithering through this tournament, and he's doing a very impressive job. I want to talk about some of his numbers a little later, but we have a match including Zverev tomorrow we'll talk about. But with respect to Djokovic, he looked very strong. He'll next play, it'll be tomorrow, Richard Gasquet. And Djokovic leads very decisively in that head-to-head one. In fact, it was all the way back in 2007 that Gasquet last was able to get the better of Djokovic. And real good time to judge the relative merits of the two players, because Djokovic, they both were just coming up, and Djokovic hadn't yet found his true character, but he was getting there. In any case, Djokovic has really dominated this. His next little problem will either be Pui or Hao Sosa. Looking fine for Djokovic. Again, the quarterfinal is going to be his big hurdle. It'll probably be Federer, though it could be Kurios. About that tomorrow, won't we? I'm looking at some of the scores here. It looks like Delpo is serving set against Fernando Verdasco. So I will be, of course, reporting on Djokovic versus Gasquet and all the matches, of course, that are occurring, the ones that are consequential and relevant for us. Of course, now, as the tournament progresses, there's going to be fewer and fewer matches, and we'll be talking about fewer and fewer matches. Some of the comments I get on the live stream is that it can be a little overwhelming. We talk about a lot of stuff. My remedy for that is that I get into the heart of a point in the first 15 minutes. Now, we're already almost a half hour into this, but I already made what I call the daily nugget, essentially, a point, a take-home point about one of the matches, and make that point in the first 15 minutes of every stream. So if you're just tuning in, remember to subscribe. Don't be intimidated by the long stream, because you'll be able to get the nugget in the first 15 minutes first. And also, another thing you can do with the stream is just kind of dip in at various points. We're always talking about relevant stuff, relevant, of course, to the day of tennis. Right now, we're concentrating, of course, on the U.S. Open, but we have some fantastic matches. I've talked a lot about the Nadal versus Khachanov match. I'm interested in what you guys think. Let me know, make some comment. But Djokovic, I think, looks good. He looks good for the quarterfinal. The quarterfinal will be his day of reckoning at this tournament, I believe. I still believe that Federer can redeem against Novak, folks. I think it can happen. Federer's capable of beating Novak. I think the courts are going to speed up a little bit with the weather changes, but it's yet to be seen how that will kind of play out at the time of the quarterfinal. First things first, of course, for Federer, he has to deal with the mighty Australian Nick Kurios, who has been a bit undependable of late, but has, again, finished matches with his head held high and posting relatively good numbers in general. But we'll just have to see. One of the points I made about Nadal, for those of you just joining us in the match today, was that it was a very difficult match, but at no point in the match did I ever feel like Nadal was not completely positive in his energy. He stayed positive the whole time. It's so commendable that he does this. I love it. And it's something that distinguishes him from Federer and certainly from Kurios. Kurios gets to the point where he sometimes just doesn't care. He starts thinking about basketball or something. I don't know what he's doing. It gets to the point where the umpire has to come down from on high and give the little brat a pep talk. I won't give Nick such a hard time. I actually like Nick Kurios. I love watching him play. He's a brilliant tennis player without question. And Tsitsipas's early exit tended to lend some credence to what I thought was a strange proposition that Kurios made, that Tsitsipas is not a very good tennis player. Well, the Medvedev match was not Tsitsipas's finest hour, folks. No, sir. Chapeau versus Anderson was a very long match. It was a 5-setter. There were some bad calls that went against Chapeau a few times. When they make a mistake in the call, sometimes they have to play the point over. If there's conflict and an overrule from the umpire, well, they play the point over sometimes, but often, and this happened at least once at a very critical time where Chapeau could have broken Anderson, they had to play a point where if they had just gotten the call right, Chapeau would have won the point and most likely have broken Anderson. Well, the final score of that match, 4-6, 6-3, 6-4, 4-6, 6-4. They were kind of just trading sets in a way. Chapeau was very solid behind his first serves, and he was hitting a ton of winners, 59 in total. But he had a low breakpoint conversion rate. And his second serve percentages, win percentages were pretty thin as well. So Chapeau's a youngster. We love Chapeau. I love his style of play. I love his one-handed backhand, but Anderson was just too much for the Canadian to handle today. But really, that match sort of could have gone either way. Chapeau should pat himself on the back. It was a good run. Anderson is a formidable opponent. Of course, Anderson, the man who beat Roger Federer from being 2 sets down. He's a marathon man. He can basically do anything. If he can beat Roger Federer from 2 sets down at Wimbledon, he can pretty much do anything. That's the truth, which means he could win the tournament. But he's going to have to get through Nadal first. And I'm not convinced he can get through Nadal at the U.S. Open this year. So we'll have to see. We talked a little bit about Stan versus Raonic. But again, Stan looked great in the first set, but just fell apart pretty much on all the different dimensions. He was protecting his serve, but he just couldn't get a piece of the great Raunic's mighty serve. And Raonic was posting some of the highest speed numbers. He serves fast. He's one of the fastest servers in the tournament. I think he may be the fastest. He and Isner, maybe there's one other guy. I'll have to check those stats, but very impressive serving and very impressive ground strokes from Raonic. He was the better player. Stan sort of fell apart, even though he looked just beautiful in the first set. I felt like if the Stanimal could just sustain the first set form, notwithstanding the fact that he, in the end, lost the first set in the tiebreak, but if he form, I thought, well, he could probably match, but he couldn't. It kind of dipped, and then he just kind of fell apart. And he lost his commitment to the match. And we can go back to the point about Nadal, because Nadal stands in contrast to just about every player. In a way, Djokovic has this capacity as well, but Nadal can do this. He stays positive. He stays positive and focused on winning all the time. Never once did make Nadal sort of disillusioned about the match or confuse or discombobulate, to use a word that one viewer liked that I used the other day. Nadal stayed focused, and he stayed that Stan did not. Stan didn't get all down and depressed. Don't get me wrong. He lost a bit of focus. Matches rise or fall on a bit of focus. Literally, that can produce a win. Someone with a marginally better amount of focus and commitment to the match can result in a win. We wish the best for Stan, and Stan has a lot of promise. Of course, he's a Grand Slam champion. He's a fantastic player. He's a torchbearer. His one-hander is just gorgeous, a work of art, and he's so effortless in his style of play. His serve is monumental. And Raonic, was having a hard time, making an impression on Stan's serve, particularly in the first set. So Stan is capable of beating Raonic. There's no question in my mind about that. But Stan lost a little bit of commitment to the match. And meanwhile, Raonic was doing a lot of things right. He was serving tremendously, and he was very solid from the ground. The man can land a devastating cross-court forehand. He can direct play. He can be a dictator in the rallies. Well, stands out, but the effortlessness that he brings to the court is reminiscent of the effortlessness that Sloane Stephens brings to the court. And I'll just mention briefly that Sloane was able to beat a Grand Slam champion, Victoria Azarenka, 6-3, 6-4 in her match today. I love Sloane Stephens, so I follow Sloane Stephens. She's on track after tonight, particularly, to be in the semifinal against Serena Williams for an All-American semifinal, and that is going to be a fantastic match. I think Sloane Stephens can win. I saw a bit of the match between the Williams sisters tonight, and Serena looks formidable. No question about it, folks. Sloane will have a very tall task set before her if she faces the great Serena Williams at the U.S. Open this year. But I believe Sloane can win. She's the defending champion. She's graceful. She's beautiful. And she is dependable. Very dependable. In a way, more dependable than the men. When I watch Sloane Stephens hit rallies, get into rallies with her opponents in a match court situation, well, Stephens can dictate, and she is virtually flawless. It's great stuff to watch, and Sloane Stephens is a great rising champion, rising star in a way. Well, let's talk also about Thiem versus Fritz. Did any of you guys see that one? Thiem versus Fritz. Thiem was able to push through the American, who's looking much more manly than I remember him. I remember seeing him, or at least I watched a fair amount of a match of his for the first time. I think it was at Indian Wells. He seemed very boyish, like he was really young and a bit green. Well, today he looked very manly, so he's maybe been working out. So he's growing up. He's growing up. Well, it's quite an education playing tennis on the professional tour. So he's maturing, but Thiem came into this, I think, with the wrong approach. He was kind of hugging the baseline, kind of pushing up on the baseline, trying to get a piece of Fritz's serves, but it wasn't working because he wasn't coordinating the footwork. So he suffered a bit in terms of trying to get a piece of Fritz and trying to make an impression on the Fritz serve. So Fritz took the first set, but Thiem took advantage of a dip in Fritz's serving and play generally and was able to forge ahead and take all of the remaining sets. There was one tie break in there. Thiem performed very well. His numbers looked very good. He was popping a few forehands and backhands out. He hits them flat sometimes. He could afford to put a little more spin on the ball. As one of the announcers was saying, to kind of get some more shape in the trajectory of his balls that he's striking. Well, that might be something Thiem can do. He makes, part of his style is that he makes unforced errors, but that's the price he pays for just clobbering the ball, hitting some tremendous, unbelievable, nearly miraculous, accelerating cross-court ground strokes off the forehand and backhand sides. He hit 59 winners in this match and also 52 unforced errors. But the unforced errors, again, is a kind of it's a misleading metric. In a way, it's it's a useful metric. It's one of the only useful metrics in one way, but in another way, the unforced errors can also be, again, the price that players play for some very excellent, brilliant tennis. So Thiem was able to keep the unforced errors below the number of winners anyway. In the last set, Thiem was 2 for 2 on his break points, 100% conversion. His serve sort of suffered to the extent that he was not able to average 5 points or below on his serve, except in the third set. So that was a bit shaky. He needs to get his service games done a little more decisively. Fritz is a very respectable player, folks. So this was a competitive match. It was fun to watch. I'm a big Dominique Thiem fan, so I was happy to see him come through. But problems are on the horizon for Thiem, folks. He's had a few fourth-round runs at the U.S. Open, but he's never gone further. And it looks like, sadly, this year that might happen again because in the fourth round, Thiem will face Kevin Anderson. And as I said before, Anderson has a very solid winning record, 6-1 against Thiem. The only time Thiem has been able to beat Anderson is on clay. And Thiem's kind of a clay specialist. Well, Roger was saying that these courts at the U.S. Open are kind of playing like clay. And that might be true. You can construct a point in much the same way as you can on clay. But they're not quite the same. And I've been watching how they play. And they're faster than the red dirt. That's for sure. They're faster than the red dirt. It's a little bit different. But I think Thiem might be able to pull a fast one. Pull the wool over the South African's eyes. There's ways to get into Kevin Anderson. He's not impenetrable, folks. He's capable of doing just about anything because, as I said before, if you can come back against Roger Federer from being 2 sets down on the lawns at Wimbledon, no less, then you're pretty much capable of doing anything in life. You can, because that's quite a rabbit to pull out of your hat. Wow, that was amazing. He's a marathon man, but that doesn't mean that he will perform brilliantly in the match against Thiem. And if Thiem holds on, stays positive, Thiem was another one, like Nadal today. He stayed positive. He lost the first set. He stayed positive. It's so important. This is going to get scrappy for Roger Federer, too. He's going to have to drop a set or two, potentially. It's an ugly process, particularly at this tournament. Roger likes the clean runs. Roger fans like the clean runs, but it's not a pretty process. It is ugly. It's all brass knuckles and jackknives, It's street fighting. And each player emerges a little bit bloodied and bruised. Even in the match with Nadal today, Nadal took a pounding today from Khachanov, folks. And Khachanov took a pounding from Nadal. One person wins in tennis, and that's the way it should be. And congratulations to Nadal. But both players do come out of it a little bit bloody. That's the only way to put it. Particularly, when it's a difficult match. It's going to be getting more difficult as this tournament progresses. It's going to get uglier. Djokovic has been bumping ugly the whole tournament. He was bumping ugly in Cincinnati. And now, he's dropping sets to tennis Sandgren. It's a rough ride. It's a rough ride, but he loves the adversity. He thrives on the adversity. Well, in a few of the other pending matches that I'll mention, we had Coric versus Medvedev, and Coric was able to come through Medvedev very convincingly, which is a little bit surprising. Medvedev was playing quite well. So Coric looks strong, folks. He's coming through the tournament pretty confidently, and need to kind of keep an eye out for Borna. He's probably going to see Delpo he is going to see Delpo. I'm sorry, is Delpo done with Verdasco yet? Probably not. He's up a break in the second. Yeah, so Coric is probably going to have to deal with Delpo in the round of 16. Big match for Coric, and commendable that he's had this deep of a run already. That's fantastic. There was Isner versus Lajovic today, which was another pretty long match. Let's check the score on Isner. It was a 4-setter. Isner wins it 7-6, 6-7, 6-3, 7-5. I like Lajovic. He's another player that has a very effective and quite beautiful one-hander. It's not as beautiful as the Stanimals, but I like Lajovic, and he's posting some increasingly good and better results the past few months. So best wishes to Dusan Lajovic, but Isner, the tower of power, the Miami champion, the Wimbledon semifinalist, is through. And who will he be facing? Well, it's going to be Raonic. It's going to be the two big boys, the two towers. Wow. Probably will be some tie breaks in that one. There's going to be some fast serving in that one. My God, light speed. Raonic was posting numbers, maybe it was 140 miles per hour. Posting some lightning fast serving. So Isner versus Raonic, my goodness. You could argue they're serve bots. It's not too far removed from a serve bot in a way. Now, John McEnroe would disagree. He absolutely loves Isner. But it's going to be a lot of big serving, and there may be some interesting stuff in terms of the ground games as well. We'll just have to see. What else? Those are the big ones, folks. I wanted to mention that there are some stats that were pretty interesting in terms of the numbers that are starting to accumulate for some of the players in this tournament, and some names that are standing out in terms of, for example, first serve win percentage. Well, Medvedev was doing real well in that category before he was ousted today by Coric. So first serve win percentage is not the end all and the be all. It doesn't win matches, but in terms of, over 85% on the win percentage, you got Struff, who's very, very good player, Raonic and Isner. In the 80 to 85 percentage in terms of the numbers from the whole tournament, you have Delpo, Thiem, and Alexander Zverev. And Coric. Coric is up there too. Coric is pretty good on the first serve win percentage. Coric may surprise a few people. We'll have to see. We'll just have to see what he can do with Delpo. Let me know if you have views on that. See you later, Cultura. Thanks for joining us. I wanted to come on. It's a little bit late tonight, but it was a long day. There was a lot of great tennis, so I had to talk about it because there's going to be so much great tennis tomorrow that I'm going to have to talk about all that great tennis tomorrow, and so it doesn't make sense to wait. Sorry I was a little late tonight. It could be a little later, might be a little earlier tomorrow, but Yes, on those stats, on the second serve win percentage, which is also a very useful metric, Nishikori is posting great numbers in that category in terms of the aggregate tournament numbers so far. Zverev is another one. Also, John Millman. And we have that match actually occurring, I think. We have some live scores. Is Kukushkin versus Millman is coming up. On break points won across the whole tournament, and the top number I think are about 16 break points won, and the lower end of the people that I'll talk about who are still in the top echelon is about 13 break points won. You got Millman, Kukushkin, they're playing each other tomorrow, and that's a very relevant match for us folks, because if Federer gets through Kurios, which he probably will, he's going to have to deal with either Millman or Kukushkin. Now, there might not be names that you've heard a lot, but they have been around a while, and they are playing really well in this U.S. Open. In terms of break points won, Millman, Kukushkin, Schwartzman, Basilashvili, who's going to be Nadal's little problem on Sunday, Thiem, Cilic, Djokovic. In terms of the conversion rate, Verdasco, coming into this match with Del Potro, was posting fantastic breakpoint conversion numbers, the top of the list. But other people that are still in the tournament, because it looks like Verdasco is going to go home tonight. Coric again, Cilic, Zverev. The Zverev name is coming up in these tournament-wide stats a lot, folks. Coric too. Cilic looked very strong. There was a couple of bagels dealt out in his last match. We have a number of movers and shakers in this tournament. Zverev, I'm calling the snake in the grass in this tournament, because he is slithering his way through this draw. And let's just look at what the young Zverev might have to contend with. Well, next up for him is Philippe Kohlschreiber. Not a tremendously formidable opponent, but Kohlschreiber is nobody's fool. He doesn't suffer fools gladly. And he has a great one-hander. If Zverev can get through to the round of 16, it'll either be Nishikori or the little engine that could, Diego Schwartzman. This is all very doable for Zverev. I think Zverev almost has a one-way ticket into this quarterfinal, folks. He has a very smooth ride into this quarterfinal. It's looking fine for him, particularly in light of the numbers he's posting. I like Zverev in this tournament. He looks good. Now, he struggled in the best-of-5 context. That is without question true. But he's coming through in straights. He's posting tremendous win percentages, serving wonderfully. He's making impressions, but it's a little covert. That's why I'm calling him the snake in the grass. He could pull a fast one on all of us, and he might just bite us all in the hind end like snakes do sometimes. So in the quarterfinal, who will be the opponent for Zverev? It'll either be Cilic or Goffin. Probably. Now, Cilic has to get through de Minaur, who's posting some very good results as well, including a bagel or two in his early matches. Struff and Goffin will play too. So Goffin presumably will get past Struff, but there's no guarantees. Struff, like I just mentioned, is posting some very impressive tournament-wide numbers. Now, the tournament-wide numbers are not as useful here on most of the metrics that they can be, for example, in Wimbledon. Because Wimbledon, I think the solid serving can be a useful metric, and if you get the tournament-wide numbers, that can be predictive of who's going to do really well in the tournament. But here, they have some probative value, but they are definitely not determinative. But Zverev will ultimately probably, as I'm seeing it, and I've been right about this so far, this tournament is shaking out basically just the way I predicted so far. But I would hope that Goffin gets through Cilic. Would love to see it because I do prefer Goffin. I would like to see him post a really good result in this tournament. But I do have doubts as to whether Goffin can set the mighty Croat aside. Cilic is on fire in this tournament, folks. It's almost reminiscent, and to be honest, watching Khachanov today reminded me of Cilic in 2014. We'll see what happens with Cilic. He's another one. He could be moving through this thing and into the semifinal and potentially into the final. It's a possibility without question. But for Zverev, it'll be probably Cilic in the quarterfinal. And then in the semifinal, if we're focusing on Zverev, and I think Cilic will be a very tall task for him, but Zverev's capable. He's capable of beating Cilic. And I would like to see him do it because, again, I would like to see some new folks into the semifinals and even the finals. Because why not? Let the new generation come in a little bit, get their time in the limelight, have a few breakthroughs. It would be fun to watch. Well, if Zverev gets beyond Cilic, or as the case may be, Goffin in the quarterfinals, it'll be a doozy of a semifinal waiting for him. A doozy of a semifinal opponent. It'll either be the elastic hyena, Novak Djokovic, according to my prediction, or the killer cat, the prowling cheetah, the goat, Roger Federer. Now, Zverev knows how to push the buttons of Federer a bit, doesn't he? I think he does. I'm not sure Zverev could get through Federer in a best-of-5 context like this. But he might be able to do a job on Djokovic. Now, that would be an interesting match. My prediction is that, my scientific prediction is that Djokovic will prevail over Roger Federer in the quarterfinal. But my emotional feeling, to be perfectly honest, or I distinguish between these things. I try to stay as conscious of these things as possible. But there's a part of me that's not scientific, that loves Roger and loves his game and loves all he's done for tennis and wants to see him win. And I believe he can win. It's certainly possible. It's certainly possible. Federer could do a job on Djokovic, folks. He's done it before. And in Cincinnati, again, he was unbeatable, Federer against Djokovic. But Djokovic did change that. And it's yet to be seen whether that was a sort of important match, a consequential match, a pivotal match in that respect as to the rivalry between Federer and Djokovic. We're just going to have to see. But we may just get some more evidence, some more fodder to put in our pipes and smoke, as it were, in the 2018 U.S. Open quarterfinal, which is likely to be Federer versus Djokovic. Now, that's going to be the money day. It's going to be a lot of money made on that match. But we've got some great matches coming tomorrow. Cilic versus Goffin, as I said. Excuse me, Cilic versus De Minaur, Struve versus Goffin, Schwartzman versus Nishikori, Kohlschreiber versus Zverev, Djokovic versus Gasquet. We didn't talk about that, but Djokovic. Oh, yeah, we did talk about it. Excuse me. Pui versus Sosa, Millman versus Kukushkin, and the winner of that match will go on to play probably Roger Federer in the round of 16. And then finally, as we've talked about many times, and as we are very highly anticipating, Roger Federer versus Nick Kurios. That will be tomorrow. I will be back with comments. I see a comment here. It says Nishikori will win. I think you might be right. Again, he's posting top numbers on the second serve win percentages. So Nishikori looks very strong. So he'll go on to face likely Zverev in the round of 16. So that'll be an interesting match as well, as I was saying. But the one really to watch, I think, the one I'm going to be watching, of course, paying most attention to, closest attention to, in a pinch, if I can't get every match, and I try to get every match for you guys, but I can't watch every minute, of course. But the Federer match will be sliced and diced in every possible way by me, observed in excruciating detail, and I will be back tomorrow with a live stream to discuss it, as well as all of the other events of day 6. It's been wonderful to be with you guys once again. I hope everyone is well. I love the way the tournament is shaking out. And let me say, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, subscribe. Make sure to hit the bell icon after you subscribe so you get notifications to the live and uncut Tennis Talk Daily streams, which are They're curling on a daily basis. They are occurring on a daily basis, and we're having a lot of fun. There's a lot, just some fantastic tennis occurring, and there's so much to talk about. It's a historic tournament. There are going to be historic results, and there may be some very substantial surprises and upsets that will be dramatic and that will be a lot of fun to watch. We're covering it all here at Tennis Talk Daily. Thank you so much for your support. I welcome you to join the live streams. For now, I'm going to sign off from Boston. Good night.